will stay.
Perfect. All right.
Obviously, you have lovely students.
All right. Should I just start, or should we
Yeah, we already
wait?
5 minutes.
Delayed? Right. Okay. So thanks for the opportunity to present here. My name is Johannes. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bremen in Germany. And today I'm really happy and grateful to have the opportunity to present one of my recent research on the crowdfunding domain, which is written together with Professor Lars Hornuf. He's from the Technical University of Dresden, also in Germany. And we explore what is an effective signal in crowdfunding evidence from expert researchers and a meta-study. To give you a quick preview of our study, and to present the paper in a nutshell, we know what effective signal is in the crowdfunding domain from the theory. We know it from the signaling theory. In the signaling theory, it said that signals need to be observable, need to be costly, and need to be that the expectations evoked can be confirmed through experience. That is what the theory tells us, but we do not know from the empirical evidence what the crowdfunding domain perceives as an effective signal in the empirical evidence. We neither know what the expert researchers conducting this research thinks about effectiveness of those signals included in the crowdfunding domain. So that is what we are after. And how do we do that? We use a meta-study to get a step closer to understand what the empirical evidence tells us about the effectiveness of signals in the crowdfunding domain. And there we find that the effective signals according to the empirical evidence are the campaign description length, the staff pick designation, and the campaign video, which is included. So it basically tells us domain-specific signals are of crucial relevance in the crowdfunding domain. Then we try to get closer to the perceptions of the expert researchers actually conducting this research, and there we find totally different. We find that those expert researchers, according to an expert survey, tell us that an entrepreneur and firm-specific signals are most important. Particularly, they tell us, okay, past crowdfunding success of an entrepreneur is important. They tell us entrepreneurial business experience is important, and they also tell us they perceive patent ownership is important. So there we find something like, okay, it's not only why we have this conference here to talk between practitioners and academia. There is a gap between research and practice, but we also already have a gap within our academic community, because we see that there is a theory evidence gap between what the expert researchers conducting this research think are effective signals and what the actual empirical evidence tells us. So with that, I want to give you my motivation for this study, and our motivation was that I think the crowdfunding domain was is now a important and central scheme for securing financial resources for entrepreneurial businesses, and this practical relevance was also followed by academic attention, and now we have reached a major stage where we expect that the research has revealed many of those really crucial signals how entrepreneurial businesses can signal their quality to the crowdfunding community. We see when we look at the literature that there are more than 1,000 variables examined, and however we find that the evidence about what is an effective signal in the crowdfunding domain is still mixed, because what we see is there are signals that prove significant and important, which are actually also a signal in the stricter sense according to the signaling theory by Spence. But what we also see is that there are signals that are not actually considered a signal in the stricter sense. Or in the stricter sense. So that is what we see and what motivated us to conduct this research. and we ask what is an effective signal in crowdfunding. And we tackle it from two perspectives. We tackle it from the meta study, and we tackle it from the expert researchers survey. So our overreaching research question is, therefore, is the expert researcher's perception of what constitutes an effective signal consistent with the empirical findings from the crowdfunding literature? And to answer this overreaching research question, we pose like three subordinated research questions. First of all, do signals that expert researchers consider to be strong signals have a significantly greater impact on the success of crowdfunding campaigns than regular signals? We pose that question because when expert researchers tell us, okay, we think this is a strong signal, we would expect that these signals also have a more pronounced effect in the empirical evidence. And then we pose like two other research questions. One targets at the positive impact of these signals. This is research question 2. Are signals that expert researchers consider to be strong signals more likely to have a positive impact on the success of a crowdfunding campaign than regular signals? And finally, we look at the share of significant coefficient estimates. Are signals that expert researchers consider to be strong signals more likely to have a statistically significant impact on the success of a crowdfunding campaign than regular signals? So we study these three research questions by using a mixed method approach. First of all, we base our study on an extensive literature review to get an impression of the current stage of the crowdfunding literature, which is pretty extensive. Out of this literature review, we identify most frequently examined signals, and with these subset of most frequently examined signals, we ask these expert researchers to rank the theoretical effectiveness of these signals to get an impression of what they perceive to be an effective signal in the crowdfunding domain. And then we test then based on these survey results, we group the 14 most frequently examined signals to 3 groups: those strong signals, regular signals, and non-signals, because in the most frequently examined signals, there are also like entrepreneur's gender, the location of the firm, which are examined as control variables, which I guess, but are no signal in the stricter sense according to Spence. So that is what we do, and then we test our 3 research questions regarding the effect size, the share of positive coefficient estimates, and the share of significant coefficient estimates using the Coxon-Rank sum test and Fisher's exact test. So first of all, we conduct the literature review. We base it on 3 main sources. First of all, we include all FT50 journals and search for seven search terms. But we also then find in the reference lists that there are other important journals, which are mostly like 4 journals: the Journal of Banking and Finance, Journals of Business Venturing Insights, Journal of Corporate Finance and Small Business Economics, which also include an important part of the crowdfunding literature. Then we added these and finally complemented all those identified articles by articles from Google Scholar to reduce the risk that we have like overlooked important other articles. After removing some duplicates and then screening the studies, we are left with 158 articles, because we excluded all those studies which particularly focus was not on crowdfunding or which was like normative legal without any empirical analyses. And then we screened all those 158 studies again, having a look at the full text to exclude some special issues like sustainable crowdfunding, to exclude some donation-based crowdfunding. And we also had to exclude 6 articles due to missing data and the failure to contact the authors to get any insights into the data. So we were left with a final sample for the meta-analysis of 145 articles, and for hypothesis testing with 82. Yes? It's all English articles, yes. And based on these articles, we identified the most frequent analyzed or studied signals, which are 14. And we extracted these and sent an email to all those authors of the articles in our study and asked them to rank these 14 signals according to their theoretical effectiveness. Out of the 326 authors in our sample, 83 replied and took part in the survey, which is a pretty good, I think, response rate of 25%, because I think all researchers are also interested in our findings. So we made an online survey. The ranking was, or the signals were presented in a randomized order, and we also included like this is not a signal option because, as I said, there were also signals or determinants include like the entrepreneur's gender or the location of the firm, which is not a signal in the stricter sense of spans. So we made pretty clear what we wanted the researchers to do, or the participants in our survey to do, to avoid any misunderstanding. And we asked them, particularly based on your expertise, which signals are in theory most effective. That is, observable, costly, and expectations evoked by the signal can be confirmed by experience. So we made pretty clear what we want to avoid any misunderstanding, and then they were asked to rank these 14 signals. Based on that, we then classify the signal groups, which is based on a multi-criteria decision analysis. So we classified those signals as strong signals if they have received at least 10% first rank votes, which is to ensure that the signals were independently by a substantial subpart of the participants ranked as important, and at the same time having an average ranking below 5, so it's ranked on average on the first 5 places to ensure that the signals are received of consistent high importance across the entire panel. So we have like, they are important to a substantial part, but they are important on average to the entire panel.
Maximum ranking is 10, yes?
Sorry?
Maximum ranking.
Yeah. No, we have like, the max ranking is like 14. One of 14 signals should be ranked, and the least effective signal is ranked on 14. And for it to be considered as a strong signal, 10% of the votes has to be like for the individual signal first rank votes, and then also on average like lower than 5. So it should be placed on average on the first 5 places. Yeah. Then we have a group of regular signals, so-called regular signals, that are those that received rankings on average higher than 5, but less than 33% of votes for this is not a signal. And finally, the non-signal group, and there we required to be 1/3 of the votes for the option this is not a signal. And we validated our classification using ANOVA and Turkey's pairwise comparison, but also using an agnostic hierarchical clustering analysis, and that all confirmed the pattern of our classification. So we believe that our classification is robust and reasonable. So to give you an impression of the perceptions of the expert researchers, we see that the expert researchers ranked the entrepreneur's past crowdfunding success really high with an average score of 3.6, but also like business experience, patent ownership, and equity share offered is ranked pretty high. We also see then a bunch of regular signals. We see there is a distinct gap because we see there is a difference in the votes for this is not a signal, and also a distinct gap between the average scores. So we believe that there is some reason to believe that there is this top group of strong signals and then the group of regular signals. And what we see, and I think that is also reasonable, we see that there is a group of non-signals which include like technology sector affiliation. We see planned campaign duration is their location in a metropolitan area, and as I pronounced, like the entrepreneur's gender, which is not a signal in the stricter sense of spans.
Campaign description then it's number of tokens, yes?
It's number of words measured in 100 words. So like when you have like 1,000, then you have like 10, but it's measured in number of words. Yeah, true, but that's not what we did, but what the researchers did in their studies. Yeah. And with this classification, we approach our empirical testing to see and to answer our research question. What we did is like, okay, first of all, we prepare our sample. We only look at these articles that actually include one of those one of these frequently investigated signals, and then to allow for a fair comparison, we only include OLS regressions, log and probability regressions. We extracted all those coefficient estimates, P and T values, as well as the standard deviations, and then standardized the coefficients to allow for a comparison between OLS regressions and prob and logit models, and then approached our Wilcoxon-Rank-Sum test and the Fisher's exact test to test our research questions. So first of all, we test between the group of strong signals and the group of regular signals according to the effect size. And what we would expect is the group of strong signals should have a stronger impact and therefore a higher effect size for the success of the crowdfunding campaign. However, we see that the Wilcoxon-Rank-Sum test cannot confirm that the stronger impact of strong signals. So what we see is that the difference in effect size between the strong signal group and the regular signal group is statistically insignificant. So that is the first indication that there might be a misalignment between expert researchers' perception and the empirical evidence. That is also what we can see when we look at the bar graph of the median effect sizes, and where we can see that the blue printed regular signals are those with the most pronounced effect size. We see that the crowdfunding platform staff pick designation has a pretty high effect on crowdfunding success. We see that the campaign video has a high impact, and also the description length. And only then patent ownership as the first strong signal kicks in, and we see that this is the next. But the most impactful signals are out of the group of perceived regular signals according to the expert researchers. Then we approach our second test. We look at the share of positive coefficient estimates. We see that 62% positive coefficient estimates for regular signals. We see 68% share of positive coefficient estimates for the strong signals. So strong signals are slightly more often positive, or do slightly more often positively influence the crowdfunding success. However, the Fisher's exact test indicates that the difference is again statistically insignificant, and that is another indication that there might be a misalignment between expert researchers' perceptions and the empirical evidence. And finally, we look at the share of statistically significant coefficients, and here again we would expect that all those signals classified as strong by the expert researchers should be statistically significant, or more likely to be statistically significant for the crowdfunding success. What we see is a totally different picture, and we see that only 22 out of 62 coefficient estimates, that is like 35% of the coefficient estimates out of the strong signal group are statistically significant. However, about 80% of the regular signals have a statistically significant coefficient estimate. And we see that this difference is as well statistically significant. So the main message is that expert researchers, signals that expert researchers consider as strong signals are significantly less often statistically significant than regular signals. We complement these findings with a meta regression and plug in all those signals and regress the effect size on the individual signals to see which signals exhibit the most pronounced effect size. And here again we see that the regular signals have the strongest influence on the funding success. We see the highest coefficient estimate for the platform staff pick designation, closely followed by the description lengths and the campaign video. But we also see that some of those general signals have a significant impact, like the patent ownership, like equity share offered, like the interest rate offered. But we see that the perceived or called regular signals have the most important influence, which are domain specific. So to summarize our findings, we see that the empirical evidence shows that signals classified as strong by expert researchers do not have a stronger impact on the crowdfunding success than regular signals. They do not have a higher share of positive coefficient estimates than the regular signals, and they even have less often a statistically significant impact on the crowdfunding success than regular signals. So there is an indication that the expert researcher's perception is not in line with the empirical findings, and that is interesting because these expert researchers, which perception is not in line with the empirical evidence, even made all those empirical evidence. They conducted all these studies, and now their own perception is not in line with the empirical evidence. And the expert researchers consider past crowdfunding success, entrepreneurs, business experience, patent ownership, and equity share offered as strong signals, while the empirical evidence tells us over the 145 articles from top journals, they tell us staff pick designation, description length, campaign video, equity share offered, and patent ownership are the most important determinants of crowdfunding success. But the question we approach then is, okay, how can we explain our finding that there is a misalignment between the expert researcher's perception and the empirical evidence? And first of all, we have like the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge claims that expert researchers might discount or dismiss signals that are important due to their long-standing expertise, because they feel like, okay, I'm confident in this field and I know what's important regardless of the empirical findings, or due to a preference to their own research. This is complemented by the theory of accumulation and dissemination of scientific knowledge, by prominently posed by Thomas Kuhn, which says that the scientific knowledge is not developed in a linear fashion, but through stages of normal science and then paradigm shifts. And the expert researcher's perception could be more like, okay, there is normal science, we rely on established theories, but this misalignment hints towards a upcoming paradigm shift that we need to discuss and rethink our implications of the individual signals in the crowdfunding domain. And lastly, we have the Matthew effect, which claims that those researchers more prominent produce all the prominent and well-known findings, but the findings of junior researchers are dismissed, likely because they are not that well established, and it's not what comes first to the mind of the expert researchers when asked which is what is an significant and important signal in the crowdfunding domain. So practical implications, we find that domain-specific signals seems to be most important in the crowdfunding domain, and that the description length, the staff pick designation, and the campaign video have a substantial impact, and that it's likely that they are cognitively easier to understand, to process, and therefore directly evident to the crowdfunding domain and the crowdfunding community, and therefore can directly influence the crowdfunding success. So let me answer this question. So what is the practical application of this research in fintech? Are you approaching the likes of Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, Fundable, and so on? Yeah. I think so. We had a look at, I think, most of those were included, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, etc. They were included in this sample. We tried to get more explicit insights for a particular platform to know, okay, maybe this result stems from like one particular platform. I think we are struggling with that because then our sample size decreases and there are only a few articles covering the same platform. But I think we consistently find that the individual visual cues are most pronounced and most important to the crowdfunding community. And there is also like research that differentiates between unexperienced crowdfunding participants and more experienced, and that also finds that the domain-specific, pretty obvious signals are more important to unexperienced investors, while like the more pronounced signals in the stricter sense of spends are more important to the experienced investors. So that is also what can explain our findings. Yeah. So with that, thanks, and yeah.